Hey, luck is a luck.
Hey guys, it's Midnight Philosopher, and welcome to my guide on how to pick your very first Medeco Biaxial. Quick disclaimer is that this isn't a guide on how to blind pick these locks, but more on how to understand your lock and the principles behind how it works in order to approach picking it for the first time. This is going to be a two-part guide, the first part being an explanation and an overview on how the lock works and strategies behind picking it, and the second part being a live example where I pick in both directions and explain what I'm doing while I'm doing it, as well as guiding the lock. First of all, let's get right into how Medecos work. So Medecos are considered to be high security locks, and the reason is they have two locking mechanisms. The first one being your basic pin tumbler, where the pins have to be lifted to the correct height in order for the plug to be able to rotate within the housing. The second locking mechanism is the sidebar. And the way the sidebar works is that it's literally a bar of metal that fits within a slot inside the plug. And on the other end of the sidebar, there's a groove that sticks out, and that fits within a groove inside the housing. Let's take a quick look at this housing here. And if you're wondering what these little half moons are, they are little anti-drill things that fit inside there. So it's not important for the operation of the lock, but if you're ever taking the lock apart and those things fall out, you're wondering where they came from. They just come from that little hole right there. There's another one right there that can go in. The groove that I'm talking about where the sidebar fits within is this right here. And another thing to point out is this symbol. That symbol is the symbol of a biaxial. So if you're ever looking at a Medeco lock and you see this little symbol right there, you know it's a Medeco Biaxial. So unless the sidebar can be retracted all the way into the plug, then it won't be able to rotate within this core right here, within that housing. So let's take a look at how that works. Here on our sidebar, we have prongs that stick out, and inside the slot here, we have little grooves in which those prongs fit within. And if you look at the sidebar, there are also these little springs, and unless you're really careful, you'll lose those springs. So be really careful because they're not attached to the sidebar. So always keep it facing up, and we'll get the sidebar into the slot here. Try to make sure it's angled right. Uh-oh, I think the spring got jammed in the wrong way. Yep. Just gonna fix them here quickly. Get that sidebar back inside. Alright, so if you look right here, you can see that the sidebar is inside, but I actually put it in upside down because you want this lip to be facing downwards. So let me fix that quickly. It will fit in the plug the wrong way, but when you actually try to reassemble it into the housing, it'll get all jammed up and it'll be very hard to get out. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay, so this is the correct way that you want the sidebar to be inside, and if you look here, you can see those prongs sticking into those slots. Now let's take a look at when I put a key pin inside the slot here, what happens. If you look at the top of this key pin here, it's a little hard to notice, but I'll show you with my diagram in a second. First of all, this is a spooled key pin, and you can see at the very top right there, there's a little notch. And unless that notch is lined up the correct way, it won't be able to drop all the way down into the plug, which I'll show you right here. If you look, even with the sidebar retracted, it's not going down. And the reason is because this needs to be spun all the way. If you look at the top of these slots, there's little grooves. So if I line it up with the groove, it'll fall in there. Now the sidebar isn't going in because it's not lined up with the hole. But if jiggle it in place enough, we'll get it to go right in place. And if you look there, the pin rotated. And that's honestly what the pins want to do most of the time. The pins want to rotate into place. So it doesn't take much to rotate them, but that's how it works. When the sidebar is lined up with the pin, it will be able to retract all the way into the plug. Let's take a closer look at these pins really quickly and the diagram that I have here. Be careful of those little springs again. I know I said it, but it's worth saying again. So here is a key pin. Here we have a false gate. Here we have a true gate. We want those notches in the back of the sidebar to fall into the true gate. If it falls into the false gate, it's not going to be able to retract enough into the plug. And these are just designed as traps in order to hook you up and make it harder to pick the lock. This is the notch that's at the back of that pin that I was talking about. And that's what prevents it from being able to drop down into the slot in the wrong position, and it also limits the rotation of the pin. If you look at the bottom of the pin, you can see that it's angled, and those angles line up with angled cuts on the key, and I'll show you that here. If you look at this key, if you look really closely, try to show you with a pick, we have an angled cut right here, we have an angled cut right here, we have an angled cut right there. Here we have a straight cut, so this is for a pin that's just straight. Here we have an angled cut like this. Here we have an angled cut. And if you are paying close attention, you'll notice there's only 3 orientations. One towards the clockwise direction, this one's also the clockwise, one that's straight, and then one that's counterclockwise. If you look here, there's these counterclockwise ones. So the pin will have to be rotated counterclockwise. That's what I mean when I say that. So looking at our pins really closely, first of all, I'll show you what the typical driver pins look like, and I'll bring that spooled key pin back so you can see it in comparison to the regular key pin. Typically we will have mushroom and standard. Occasionally you will see barrel spools inside the Medeco locks, and even more rarely they'll be matching counter milling inside the plug, but I don't have that to show you. But here on the key pin, if you look very closely, get it to focus, here is our true gate. Sorry about the focus there. Here is our true gate, and then if I rotate it slightly a bit more, you will see that false gate. Now, I drew out on the diagram so that way you can see a little bit better, because it's hard to see up close like this. But if you look closely, you can see those 2 gates right there, the deeper one being the true gate, the shallower one being the false gate. Alright, so now going into the strategies on how to pick it, let's look at how pin rotation works. So if I put a pin inside, just like this, there are the main things you have to keep in mind. I'll show you first of all what pick I've been using to pick these locks. It's a lifter pick. It has a little groove at the tip of it, and that groove you can use to really kind of get a grip of those angled chiseled cuts, and it allows the pin to rotate more easily. So now if we look at this slot right here, the slots in the plug right here, when I stick my pick inside, right now the pin, if you look at the notch in the back of the pin, you'll see it's already rotated all the way to this direction. So I wouldn't be able to rotate it anymore clockwise. But if I want to rotate it counterclockwise, I can go to the left side of the pin and then pull it backwards. I can also go to the right side of the pin and try to push it forwards. So when I'm going in, I'll try to go to the right side and push it forward like that, and it rotated it, just like that. I can also go from behind it and try to lift it back, but it's already fully rotated. So now let's apply the same principle. Turn the pick towards the right side, and now I can pull it back, and that will rotate the pin back. I can go underneath it and keep pulling it back, and you'll see you'll slowly start to rotate that pin backwards. There we go. So sometimes when you're rotating, it doesn't want to go the way that you want it to, but you just have to keep pulling and wiggling it. Oops, sorry about the focus. Keep pulling and wiggling until it gets to that spot that you can see it's all the way at the end there. Now, same thing. I'm going to try to pull from the opposite side, and that pulls it this way. You see? So these principles apply in both directions. I'm going to push from the left side now. If I push from the left side,
that should rotate it towards the clockwise direction. Sorry about the changing focus, but I really want you guys to get a good view of this pin rotation here. See, I'm pushing it, and now that rotated it. Okay, so it takes some wiggling around, and especially with the spring pressure from the top of it, it will really impact the feeling of it. But at least just to get a good feeling of what it's like to rotate the pins, it's a good idea to take it out and just kind of wiggle your pick in and see what happens when you move it around and see how you can actually rotate the pins. Another thing to mention is when you lift the pin towards the right side, you kind of pull your pick back slightly when you lift. It will rotate that pin towards the clockwise direction, I find. So let me find that. I'll try to demonstrate that here. So when I push like that up on this side, you see how it turns the pin while I push? And same thing, trying to get it all looking through my camera. But if I push from this side as I lift, it rotates the pin. Do you see how it rotated it as I lifted? And same thing from the other side. If I push the pin from the other side, it rotates it. Again, sorry about the focus, but it rotates it counterclockwise. Anyways, again, I really apologize about it's like the long-winded explanation about all of that, but I didn't understand this stuff when I was learning about how these pin rotations worked, and having kind of more of a visual explanation like that would really help me, so I figure it might be useful to someone. Another thing I want to point out is it's really good to map out your lock. So this is the lock that I will be working with in part 2, and if you look here, I have pin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have all the rotations and the false gates marked out, and the true gates. The true gates are the hollow ones, and the false gates are the blackened ones. And here I have what my little code to remind myself what pins are where. So I have my key pins on this side. So just standard key pin, standard key pin, standard key pin, spooled key pin, standard key pin, spooled key pin. And then on this side, I have my driver pin. So standard, standard, mushroom, mushroom, standard, mushroom. And then over here, I wrote out Roman numerals to kind of signify to myself the heights of the pin. So I know it's really extreme to do all of this. I also wrote out here the direction of the pins, because on Medeco Biaxials, the pin can either be angled forward, or it will be angled backwards, where that chiseled end here will either be facing away from you or it will be facing towards you. It won't be ever on the side. It'll either be one way or another. On the Medeco Classics, I think it's only one direction that it can be, but on the Biaxials, it can be either way. So here I have a little diagram to let myself know, okay, this key pin, I have the chiseled end facing me. On this key pin, I have the chiseled end facing away from me. And also, I drew little arrows to tell myself which direction I need to pull the pin to rotate it. I know I already have the rotations marked here, but it's just a little extra reminder. So down means pull, up means push. So on this pin, I would want to, pin 1, I want to pull it on the right side, and I want to push it on the left side. And you can go through and see how I have it all marked out here. Here, I have all these numbers. This is how I progressively pin my lock in order to learn it the first time. So, and it looks extreme, and you can go through this if you're interested, pause the video or look at it throughout the video. But I started with pin 1, then I went to pin 1 and 2, and you can see then instead of doing 1, 2, 3, I did 2 and 3, and then I did 1, 2, and 3. And you can kind of see this was my strategy. It might work for somebody else, might not, but I just figured this little overview of how it would work would be helpful to some. And now let's get to picking, so that way I can show you guys more in detail what I'm talking about. Thanks for tuning in. Get ready for part 2. Take care.